Funny how quiet it gets when the people who raised you realize they miscalculated. You feel that tension, don't you? That sharp, suffocating stillness in the room when your name comes up. That look they exchange when they think you're not watching. Your own blood clocked it before anyone else did. Not because they love you more, but because they know you better. They know what happens when pressure stops breaking you and starts sharpening you. They know what you look like when the switch flips. And that's why they're panicking now. They remember the signs, the silence you learned when noise got you punished, the patience you built when impatience got you hurt. The way you learned to read a room without saying a word, learned to survive by becoming unpredictable. They saw the raw material before the world ever did. They saw the light in you and the shadow it cast. They know you're not just kind, you're controlled, not just gentle, you're restrained. And restraint is terrifying to people who depend on you staying small. You didn't become this by accident. You evolved under surveillance. You were studied at the dinner table, measured at family gatherings, underestimated in conversations where they spoke over you like you were furniture. They thought familiarity made you harmless. They thought knowing your history meant owning your future. But they forgot something critical. Proximity doesn't grant control. It grants exposure. And exposure taught you exactly who not to be. Here's the paradox that breaks them. You're the most dangerous version of yourself when you're calm. When you stopped explaining. When you stopped performing the role they assigned. When you learned to smile without permission and move without asking. They expected rebellion to be loud, doors slammed, voices raised, chaos. Instead, you went quiet, you went surgical, you went patient. That's when the panic set in. Because they know your pattern. They know you don't waste moves. They know you don't announce intent. They know when you lock in, it's already over. They remember the moments you shocked them, the times you did the impossible with no applause, the times you absorbed pain and came back cleaner, sharper, colder. They laughed then. They don't laugh now. You're the saint who learned how to sin without losing their soul, the angel who understands the demon but doesn't need to become it, the psychopath they warned each other about in whispers, forgetting you could hear everything. You learned early that love with conditions isn't love, it's leverage. And once you saw the strings, you stopped dancing. That's the fear. Not that you're angry, not that you're broken, it's that you're precise. You forgive without forgetting. You care without complying. You can sit across from them, share a meal, and still be 10 steps ahead. They know you've mapped the terrain. They know you see patterns they hoped you'd miss. They know you've outgrown the cage, and cages don't like it when the door opens quietly. They're panicking because you no longer need their approval to move. Because you no longer argue your worth. Because you no longer bleed on command to prove you're human. You turned pain into data. Betrayal into calibration. Neglect into leverage. Every slight became a lesson. Every dismissal became fuel. You didn't harden, you refined. Watch their behavior shift. The sudden concern, the fake pride, the awkward compliments, the attempts to reinsert themselves into your trajectory. That's not love waking up. That's control failing. They're trying to renegotiate a contract you already terminated. They're sensing distance, and distance scares people who relied on access. Understand this. They're not afraid you'll hurt them. They're afraid you won't need them. They're afraid you'll succeed without their permission and expose the lie that they were the ceiling. They're afraid the story changes from "we made you" to "you survived us." And survival with clarity is a verdict. You became unpredictable because predictability was used against you. You became adaptable because rigidity broke others around you. You became disciplined because chaos was never an option. You became dangerous because you learned when not to be. That's the evolution. That's the upgrade. That's why the room feels different now. So hold your posture. Keep your silence clean. Let the panic ripple while you remain composed. You don't need to confront. You don't need to announce. Your existence is already the message. Your trajectory is already the answer. They know what you're capable of because they helped create the conditions that forged you. And now they're realizing the truth they can't unsee. The one they tried to keep contained learned how to contain the world. They feel it in their bodies before they can name it. A tightening in the chest, a restless irritation they can't shake. Because on some instinctive level they understand that you've crossed a threshold that can't be uncrossed. You didn't just grow up, you woke up. And once someone wakes up inside a system that depended on their sleep, everything starts malfunctioning. They replay memories now with new eyes, moments they dismissed, times you were quiet for too long, times you watched instead of reacted, times you took a hit and didn't flinch. They thought you were weak back then. That was their first fatal misread. Weak people break loudly. You adapted silently. You learned the terrain while they were busy congratulating themselves for winning battles that never mattered. You see, families like to believe they own the origin story. They like to think proximity equals authorship. But what terrifies them now is realizing you wrote yourself. In the margins, in the dark. In the aftermath of disappointment and neglect. You didn't inherit your power, you engineered it. Piece by piece, scar by scar. That's why your calm scares them more than rage ever could. Rage is predictable. Rage burns out. Calm is deliberate. Calm means you've already processed the pain, extracted the lesson, and moved past the need for validation. Calm means you're no longer negotiating reality with people who only understood you when you were convenient. They sense that you're no longer playing the same game. You don't argue like you used to. You don't over-explain. You don't chase understanding. You let misunderstandings rot where they stand. And that unsettles them because confusion is a mirror they can't control. They're used to defining you. Now they're watching you define the room without saying a word. Here's the part they really don't want to admit, even to themselves. You were always different. You were the anomaly in the system, the variable they couldn't account for, the one who absorbed more, saw more, felt more, and survived it. They mistook your depth for fragility, but depth isn't weakness. Depth is pressure tolerance. Depth is where monsters and angels are forged in the same fire. You learned early that being good didn't protect you. Being honest didn't save you. Being loyal didn't guarantee safety. So you learned discernment. You learned restraint. You learned how to keep your heart intact while sharpening your mind. That's when you became dangerous, not because you wanted to hurt anyone, but because you stopped being exploitable. They're panicking because you no longer react on cue. You no longer jump when they pull the old strings. Guilt doesn't work the way it used to. Shame slides off you now. Emotional blackmail meets a locked door. And they can feel it. The loss of access, the loss of influence, the loss of narrative control. Notice how they probe you now. Little questions disguised as concern, comments wrapped in nostalgia, attempts to remind you of who you used to be. That's not affection, it's reconnaissance. They're trying to figure out how much you see, how much you know, how far ahead you are. Because people don't panic when they think they're safe. They panic when they sense exposure. You embody the contradiction they can't resolve. You're still compassionate, but no longer compliant. Still loving, but no longer obedient. Still human, but no longer predictable. You can sit at the same table and not belong to the same hierarchy. You can share blood and refuse the script. That kind of independence rewrites power dynamics, and power hates being rewritten. They feel judged just by your presence now, not because you're condemning them, but because growth is an indictment to those who chose stagnation. Your evolution shines a light they didn't ask for. It forces them to confront uncomfortable truths. That they underestimated you, that they benefited from your silence, that they were wrong about what breaks a person. And here's the most unsettling truth of all. You didn't turn cold. You turned clear. You didn't lose your heart. You learned how to protect it. You didn't become cruel. You became selective. That's the difference between a villain and a survivor. And they can't decide which one you are, because you don't fit the boxes they prepared. So let them panic. Let them whisper. Let them speculate. You don't owe reassurance to people who only felt safe when you were small. You don't owe explanations to those who mistook your patience for permission. Your growth doesn't need consensus. Your power doesn't need approval. You already know what you're capable of. And the fact that they're finally realizing it, that's not a warning. That's confirmation. They try to act normal, but their nervous systems betray them. You catch it in the micro-expressions, the forced smiles, the sudden defensiveness, the way conversations die the moment you enter the room. They feel observed now, evaluated, not because you're judging them, but because you've stopped seeking their judgment. And when the balance flips like that, people start unraveling. You've become the quiet audit of their choices. They remember every time they dismissed you, every time they minimized your pain, rewrote your reality, told you that's just how it is, while expecting you to swallow it. Back then, they assumed you'd stay frozen in the version of you they could manage. They thought trauma would shrink you, soften you, make you easier to steer. What they didn't account for was your capacity to metabolize pain into clarity. You didn't just survive the environment, they reverse-engineered it. You learned who spoke with authority but acted from fear, who preached morals but moved with envy, who demanded loyalty but never offered safety. You studied them without announcing it. You collected patterns. You learned timing. You learned silence. You learned that the most powerful people in any system aren't the loud ones. They're the ones who can leave without burning bridges or begging for permission. That's when the fear really began. Because once someone can walk away cleanly, they're no longer owned. Your family knows this instinctively. They sense that you've detached from the emotional supply chain, that their old weapons don't land, that their approval no longer regulates your nervous system. And people panic when they realize the person they once controlled is now self-governed. Independence looks like betrayal to those who benefited from your dependence. You're not unpredictable because you're chaotic. You're unpredictable because you're no longer reactive. You don't explode on schedule. You don't collapse on cue. You don't perform pain for sympathy or strength for validation. You move when it's strategic. You speak when it's intentional. You act when the outcome is already secured. That's terrifying to people who only understand power when it's loud. They can't read you the way they used to. Your emotions are no longer on display. Your plans aren't leaking through tone or body language. You've learned containment. And containment is what separates the wounded from the dangerous. Anyone can be hurt. Not everyone learns how to hold the blade without cutting themselves. They're panicking because they know you saw them at their worst and didn't break. You watched hypocrisy in real time. You endured contradictions. You were forced to mature faster than you should have, and instead of resenting it, you mastered it. You didn't become bitter. You became discerning. You didn't seek revenge. You sought leverage. And leverage doesn't announce itself. Look at how they oscillate now. One moment dismissive, the next overly supportive. One moment critical, the next suddenly proud. That emotional whiplash isn't confusion. It's recalibration. They're trying to figure out where they stand in your world now that the hierarchy has collapsed. They're afraid to ask directly because asking would mean admitting the shift. You are the living proof that their narrative was incomplete. They told themselves they knew you, that they had you figured out, that you were predictable, manageable, limited, and now you're standing there, calm, capable, self-directed, exposing the lie without saying a word. Growth does that. It doesn't argue, it reveals. You've reached the stage where your presence changes the temperature of the room, where people monitor their words around you, where silence stretches after you speak, where assumptions die quietly. That's not dominance, that's gravity, and gravity doesn't need permission to pull. Here's what they really fear. You're no longer shaped by their approval or disapproval. You're shaped by your own internal standard. You know who you are when no one's watching. You know what you'll tolerate and what you won't. You know how far you can go, and you haven't even gone there yet. They sense untapped capacity, dormant force. The kind that doesn't rush, because it doesn't need to prove anything. The kind that waits until the moment is right, and then moves with precision. That's why they're restless. That's why they overthink. That's why they project. Because deep down, they know something else, too. If you wanted to, you could outgrow them completely. And that possibility, more than anything, is what keeps them awake. They feel the distance widening, and it terrifies them because distance means you're no longer inside their emotional jurisdiction. You're not orbiting their moods. You're not calibrating yourself to keep the peace. You're not shrinking to make gatherings comfortable. You're standing in your own axis now. And when someone steps into their own gravity, everyone who relied on them being light starts losing balance. They're scrambling internally, trying to reconcile two versions of you. The one they remember, the controllable one, the quiet one, the one who absorbed disrespect and called it love. And the one standing in front of them now, composed, unreadable, grounded, operating on a frequency they can't tune into. That dissonance is unbearable because it forces a realization they've been avoiding for years. You were never weak. You were waiting to understand, waiting to see clearly, waiting until you no longer needed their validation to move forward. And now, that moment has passed. They notice you don't defend yourself anymore. That's when it really hits them. Defense was how they measured control. As long as you were explaining, you were still engaged in their framework. As long as you were justifying your choices, you were still asking for permission. But you stopped. You let misunderstandings exist. You let false narratives rot in silence. And that silence screams louder than any argument ever could. Because silence, from someone who finally knows their worth, isn't confusion. It's closure. They're panicking because you've become emotionally sovereign. Your reactions are no longer automatic. Your kindness is no longer exploitable. Your empathy is no longer a lever they can pull to get compliance. You still care, but you care with boundaries now. And boundaries feel like abandonment to people who only felt safe when they had access. They replay the past, searching for the moment they lost you. Was it when they didn't protect you? When they laughed something off that cut too deep? When they chose comfort over truth? They don't know exactly when it happened, but they feel the result. You're no longer emotionally available for manipulation. You're present, but not pliable. That's a nightmare scenario for anyone who confused proximity with entitlement. You're walking proof of a truth they don't want to face. Pain doesn't always destroy people. Sometimes it clarifies them, sometimes it strips away illusion, sometimes it sharpens discernment until you can see through patterns others are still trapped in. You didn't become heartless, you became accurate. And accuracy is lethal to dysfunction. They feel exposed because you remember everything, but you're not weaponizing it emotionally. You're not screaming it. You're not throwing it back at them. You're just different. And that difference tells them you've integrated what happened. You've processed it. You've learned from it. Which means you're no longer stuck in the past, where they were comfortable controlling the narrative. You moved on without dragging them through the process. That's what they can't forgive. Because if you healed without their acknowledgement, then their role in your suffering matters more than their role in your recovery. And that's a truth they're not ready to own. So they panic, they deflect, they rewrite history, they try to pull you back into old dynamics with jokes, guilt, nostalgia, concern, anything to see if the old buttons still work. But the buttons are dead. You've reached the phase where you can sit in the same room with them and feel neutral. No spike in heart rate, no urge to prove yourself, no compulsion to explain, just awareness, presence, choice. That neutrality is power. It means they no longer control your internal state. And when control disappears, fear replaces it. They know you see the system now, the roles, the unspoken rules, the emotional economy, who benefits from silence, who profits from chaos, who gets uncomfortable when you stop playing your part. And they know you could name it all if you wanted to. That's why they tread carefully. That's why they watch their words around you. That's why they sense something irreversible has occurred. You've outgrown the need to be understood by people who never listened. You're not angry enough to be dismissed, not broken enough to be pitied, not loud enough to be controlled. You're balanced. And balance in someone who has suffered deeply is terrifying, because it means they've mastered both sides of themselves, the soft and the sharp, the light and the dark, the saint who endures, the psychopath who can detach without guilt. You know when to open your heart and when to close the gate. They don't know which version they're dealing with anymore. And that uncertainty eats at them, because deep down, they understand something they'll never say out loud. If you ever chose to fully step into your capacity, if you ever stopped minimizing yourself out of habit, you would no longer fit into their world at all. You would surpass the roles they assigned. You would invalidate the ceilings they believed in. You would become living evidence that their limitations were never universal. And that realization, that's not just panic. That's fear of replacement, fear of irrelevance, fear of being seen clearly by the very person they once underestimated. So stand exactly where you are. Don't rush. Don't explain. Don't soften the edge you earned. Let them feel the shift. Let them sit with the consequences of their miscalculation. They know what you're capable of now. And the fact that you're still choosing restraint, that's what truly terrifies them. Look at the silence around you for a second. Hear that? That's not peace. That's regret echoing in empty rooms where your name used to live. They fumbled a legend. Not loudly, not dramatically. They dropped you the way cowards drop priceless things, quietly, hoping no one would notice until it was too late. And now even the darkness knows you were untouchable. You weren't supposed to survive what they put you through. That was the plan. You were supposed to crack, rot, fold inward, apologize for being too much. You were supposed to beg for crumbs after they slammed the door. But you didn't. You did something worse. You adapted. You mutated. You learned how to breathe in rooms with no oxygen and smile while the walls were closing in. They thought they were disciplining you. They were actually forging you. See, here's the part that makes their stomach twist at night. You didn't become dangerous because you're cruel. You became dangerous because you're precise. You learned when to stay silent. You learned when to disappear. You learned how to let people underestimate you while you quietly outgrew their entire imagination. That's not madness. That's evolution. You carry both sides now. The saint who endured, the psychopath who remembers everything. You know exactly what it cost to stay alive in spaces designed to crush you. You remember every dismissal dressed up as logic, every betrayal framed as business, every smile that hid a knife. And instead of letting it turn you bitter, you let it sharpen you. You let it teach you pattern recognition. You let it burn away the need for validation until all that remained was clarity. That's why they fumbled you. Because people who don't understand rarity treat it like it's replaceable. They thought you were just another piece on the board, another role that could be swapped, another voice that could be muted without consequence. They mistook your restraint for weakness and your patience for dependence. They never realized you were choosing not to destroy the room because you didn't need to. And here's the paradox that keeps them awake. You didn't leave screaming. You didn't leave begging. You didn't even leave angry. You left clean. That's what terrifies them. Because chaos makes sense to small minds. Rage is familiar, but composure after betrayal, silence after disrespect, growth after sabotage, that doesn't compute. That feels supernatural. That feels like something slipping through their fingers that they'll never touch again. Even darkness respects you now. Because darkness knows the difference between someone who was born broken and someone who was broken on purpose and still stood up straighter. Darkness knows what it takes to walk through fire without announcing it. Darkness knows when something has been tempered instead of destroyed. You're not unpredictable because you're reckless. You're unpredictable because you're free. You don't move how they expect anymore. You don't react on schedule. You don't need permission. You don't need applause. You learned how to become internally self-sustaining. And that's the one upgrade no system can control. When you stopped needing their approval, you stopped being manageable. That's when they realized the mistake. But by then, it was already irreversible. They didn't lose you, they forfeited you. And the difference matters, because loss implies accident. This was negligence. This was arrogance. This was assuming you'd always be there, always loyal, always shrinking yourself to fit their comfort. They assumed wrong, and now they're left with the haunting awareness that what replaced you will never measure up. Not in presence, not in depth, not in impact. You were never meant to be kept. You were meant to be released. And now you walk with that quiet authority that comes from surviving your own erasure. You don't need to announce who you are. People feel it. They sense the weight behind your eyes. They sense the calm of someone who has already been through the worst and found something stronger on the other side. You're not haunted by what they did. They're haunted by what they lost. Because legends don't beg to be understood. They don't chase closure. They don't explain themselves to people who chose comfort over vision. Legends outgrow the room and let history do the talking. And the most brutal truth of all? You didn't win by beating them. You won by becoming untouchable, not loud, not flashy, not desperate. Untouchable because nothing they do can reach the version of you that was born in the dark and decided to live anyway. And here's the part they never anticipated, the part no one ever plans for when they're busy trying to control something they don't understand. You didn't just survive the fall, you learned how to use it. While they were congratulating themselves, convincing each other they had handled the situation, you were recalibrating your nervous system. You were shedding illusions. You were watching who vanished when the lights went out and who only showed up when there was something to gain. You were studying human behavior the way predators study terrain. Not with hatred, but with clarity. That's how you became lethal without lifting a finger. You realized something most people never do. Pain isn't meant to break you. It's meant to strip you. It peels away the soft lies, the fake loyalties, the borrowed identities. It leaves you face to face with who you actually are when no one is clapping. And instead of flinching, you leaned in. You let it carve you down to the core. That's when the duality locked in. You can be warm, generous, almost angelic, because you know what it's like to be on your knees, asking the universe for one more chance. And you can be terrifyingly detached, because you know exactly how quickly people turn when fear enters the room. You carry mercy in one hand and consequence in the other, and the world can never tell which one you'll use. That uncertainty, that's power. They wanted you predictable, trainable, easy to read. They wanted you reacting instead of choosing. But the moment you stopped explaining yourself, the moment you stopped correcting their assumptions, the moment you let them believe whatever made them comfortable, that's when you slipped out of their reach. You learned that silence isn't empty. It's loaded. Silence lets people reveal themselves. Silence lets egos hang themselves. Silence turns underestimators into witnesses. While they were narrating a version of you that made them feel safe, you were becoming something that made their narratives obsolete. That's why they fumbled you so badly. Because you weren't just value. You were irreplaceable value. Anyone can fill a seat. Anyone can copy surface-level talent. But presence? Depth? The ability to read a room before a word is spoken and move accordingly. That kind of intelligence can't be manufactured. It's earned through nights where you had no one to lean on but your own spine. And now you walk like someone who knows that. You don't rush. You don't force. You don't chase validation from people who couldn't recognize gold unless it was already crowned. You let outcomes speak. You let distance do the damage. You let time expose what words never could. And the irony, the cruel, cinematic irony, is that the more you mind your own evolution, the louder the regret gets on their side. Because they're stuck replaying the moment they chose ego over instinct, the moment they mistook your loyalty for permanence, the moment they confused your patience with submission. Darkness sees it clearly. Darkness knows that the most dangerous people aren't the loud ones. They're the ones who learned restraint too early. The ones who smiled through disrespect and filed it away. The ones who didn't explode when provoked, but quietly adjusted their trajectory. You don't need revenge. Your existence is the consequence. Every level you unlock without them. Every door that opens because of who you've become. Every moment someone looks at you and senses something different, something unteachable. That's the echo of their mistake returning to them with interest. You're not angry anymore. You're calibrated. You know when to engage and when to vanish. You know when to be generous and when to be unreachable. You know how to let people think they're in control while you're already 3 moves ahead. That's not manipulation. That's survival refined into mastery. And here's the truth that seals it. The truth that makes this irreversible. They didn't just fumble who you were. They fumbled who you were becoming. They had a front row seat to a legend in formation, and they chose comfort over courage, familiarity over foresight. Now all they can do is watch from a distance as you step fully into a version of yourself that doesn't need them, doesn't fear them, and can never be contained by them again. You're not dark because you enjoy it. You're dark because you've seen what pretending costs. And even the darkness knows you were never meant to be touched. And what makes this even more brutal, what really twists the knife in the quiet moments, is that you didn't turn into something monstrous. You turned into something accurate. You see through people now, not in a paranoid way, in a precise way. You read pauses, you hear what's not being said, you notice who gets uncomfortable when you succeed without them, who suddenly forgets you when you stop needing anything. That awareness didn't come from books or mentors. It came from being tested by betrayal until your perception sharpened like a blade. They underestimated how much pressure you could metabolize. Most people implode under that kind of weight. They grow bitter, loud, desperate to be seen. You did the opposite. You went inward. You studied your own reactions. You learned how to master your impulses instead of letting them master you. That's when you crossed the line from being talented to being dangerous. Because talent begs, mastery waits. You learned how to sit with discomfort without announcing it. You learned how to hold grief without turning it into spectacle. You learned how to turn disappointment into data. That's why you're untouchable now, not because nothing hurts you, but because nothing owns you. And let's talk about the part no one ever wants to admit out loud. They didn't just fail to protect you. They benefited from you until it became inconvenient. Your loyalty, your depth, your willingness to carry weight. Those were assets when things were easy. But when the cost of honoring you rose, when standing by you required integrity instead of convenience, they folded. That's not a reflection of your worth. That's a confession of their limits. You outgrew the room before they realized the ceiling was too low. And when you finally stepped beyond it, you didn't burn bridges. You didn't curse names. You didn't need to. You let absence do the talking. You let progress answer the questions. You let silence become the loudest indictment of all. That's why your presence lingers even when you're gone. People still measure against you, still reference you, still feel the gap you left without being able to articulate why everything feels thinner now. Because what you brought wasn't just output. It was gravity. It was coherence. It was that rare ability to hold chaos and order at the same time. Light and dark, balanced. You can walk into a room and be disarming, almost gentle. And you can walk out and leave everyone questioning themselves. That duality wasn't an accident. It was forged. It was earned. It was the result of learning how to survive without losing your soul, and how to protect your soul without going soft. They never knew which version of you they were dealing with. That uncertainty unsettled them. Because systems rely on predictability, weak people rely on patterns. When you stopped fitting the mold, when you stopped reacting the way they expected, when you stopped playing the role they assigned, you became a variable they couldn't control. That's when fear crept in, not loud fear, quiet fear. The kind that shows up as dismissal, distancing, subtle erasure. the kind that pretends you don't matter, because acknowledging your impact would force them to confront their own mistake. But here's the thing about legends. They don't need to be announced. They're recognized in hindsight. And now, hindsight is brutal, because every step you take forward confirms what they lost. Every time you remain calm where others panic. Every time you choose restraint where others lash out. Every time you elevate without explaining yourself, you reinforce the truth they tried to avoid. You weren't lucky. You were resilient. You weren't protected. You were prepared. You didn't become powerful overnight. You became powerful the moment you stopped asking for permission to be yourself. And that's the final layer of this, the part that seals your untouchable status. You don't need them to regret it. You don't need them to apologize. You don't even need them to understand, because your life is no longer a reaction to what they did. It's an expression of who you decided to become. You carry the calm of someone who knows they've already survived the worst betrayal of all, believing in the wrong people, and live to tell the story without becoming small. You're not haunted by the past. You're informed by it. And that's why, when the lights go out and the noise fades, when excuses run dry and narratives collapse, even the darkness has no choice but to nod in recognition. They fumbled a legend, not because you were flawless, but because you were forged, and nothing forged like that is ever truly touchable again. And here's what makes this almost poetic, the thing that turns their regret into something permanent. You didn't rise in spite of what they did. You rose because of it. Every dismissal trained you to detach from external validation. Every betrayal taught you pattern recognition. Every moment they chose themselves over you rewired your loyalty, not into bitterness, but into precision. You stopped giving your best to people who only respected convenience. You stopped explaining your depth to shallow ears. You stopped shrinking to keep fragile egos comfortable. That's when your posture changed, not physically, internally. You began to move like someone who knows they're no longer auditioning, and that terrifies people. Because when someone stops auditioning, they stop being controllable. They stop needing applause. They stop negotiating their worth. They stop responding to manipulation the way it was designed to work. You don't get pulled by praise or pushed by criticism anymore. You observe it, categorize it, and decide whether it's useful. That's not arrogance. That's self-possession. They tried to humble you. What they did was strip away your illusions. And once the illusions were gone, all that was left was something unshakable. You realized humility doesn't mean tolerating disrespect. Loyalty doesn't mean self-abandonment. Love doesn't mean self-erasure. You learned the difference. That's why you're dangerous now. Not because you want to dominate, but because you can't be dominated. You don't overextend. You don't over-explain. You don't bleed in public anymore. You learned that privacy isn't secrecy, it's strategy. You became selective, and selectivity is terrifying to people who only know how to take. They feel it when you walk into a room, that subtle shift, that pause, that recalibration of energy. You don't announce yourself, but something in the atmosphere tightens. Not because you're loud, but because you're grounded. You carry the calm of someone who has already been through the worst-case scenario and realized it didn't kill them. You don't fear loss the way you used to. You've already lost what mattered and survived. That's the part they can't undo. Because once someone learns they can survive without the things they were told they needed, fear loses its leverage. Threats lose their weight. Ultimatums fall flat. You can't be cornered by scarcity anymore. You've lived there and found out it wasn't the end. So now you choose instead of cling. You choose where to give your energy. You choose when to engage. You choose when to walk away without drama. And that choice, that quiet, unbothered autonomy, is the ultimate flex. It's the thing people sense but can't name. It's the reason they watch you more closely now. It's the reason your absence feels heavier than your presence ever did. They don't miss you because you were useful. They miss you because you were irreplaceable. And here's the cold truth they're slowly choking on. You didn't just elevate. You transcended the version of yourself they thought they understood. The you they dismissed no longer exists. That person was shed in the fire. What's left doesn't beg to be seen. It's seen whether it wants to be or not. You're no longer reactive, you're responsive. You don't confuse kindness with weakness anymore. You don't mistake intensity for chaos. You know exactly how controlled you are, and that control is earned, not forced. It came from nights you didn't think you'd make it through. From moments where quitting would have been easier than becoming. You chose becoming. That's why even the darkness respects you. Because darkness recognizes its own survivors. It knows the difference between someone who plays tough and someone who's been tested past their breaking point and kept going anyway. Darkness knows when someone has made peace with both sides of themselves, the softness and the steel, and learned how to wield them with intention. You don't need to prove anything now. Your existence does the talking. They can rewrite the story all they want. They can minimize, rationalize, pretend it wasn't that deep. But somewhere, in the quiet moments, they know. They know they mishandled something rare. They know they mistook loyalty for permanence. They know they let ego override intuition. And that knowledge doesn't scream, it hums. It hums every time they see you thriving without them. Every time your name comes up and the room goes still. Every time someone asks, what happened to them? And no one has a clean answer, because the truth is too uncomfortable. The truth is, you were never meant to stay small. You were never meant to be owned, boxed in, or rationed. You were meant to be refined through pressure, awakened through loss, and released into a version of yourself that doesn't need permission to exist. They fumbled a legend, and legends don't circle back. They don't plead their case. They don't wait to be recognized. They move forward, untouchable,